My brother's new business was supposed to make our family proud. I found out about the bankruptcy filing with my name on it at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 weeks before his grand opening party. But let me back up. I am a contracts attorney at a mid-size firm in Austin, Texas. I review agreements for a living. I catch the details other people miss, the buried clauses, the vague language, the signatures that do not belong where they are placed. Numbers and legal language are the architecture of my days. I am precise. I am careful. I am, apparently, the only person in my family who understands what the word liability actually means. My brother Daniel is 34. He has the kind of magnetic confidence that makes people hand him money without asking too many questions. He has been starting businesses since he was 22. A food truck that lasted 8 months, an app that never launched, a consulting firm that consisted of a logo and a LinkedIn profile. Every single time, my parents treated each new venture like it was going to be the one. The breakthrough. The moment the family name finally meant something in the business world. Our parents immigrated from South Korea when Daniel and I were children. They worked themselves into the ground for decades. My father at a dry cleaning shop, my mother doing alterations out of our kitchen so their children could have better lives. Daniel understood their dream as being his dream. He was going to build an empire. I understood their sacrifice differently. I became a lawyer so I would never be financially vulnerable the way they had been. Daniel and I were never close. He found me boring. I found him reckless. We existed in parallel lines, the kind of siblings who are polite at Thanksgiving and do not call otherwise. That was the arrangement, and for a long time it worked. Then came Harvest and Root. That was the name of his restaurant. Farm-to-table concept, locally sourced ingredients, exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, every trendy box checked. He had a location in East Austin, a chef he had poached from a well-reviewed spot downtown, and a business partner named Trevor who wore linen shirts and talked about the vision every time I saw him. My parents were ecstatic. My mother had already told everyone at her church. My father had quietly put in $40,000 of their retirement savings as a show of faith. I had smiled and said nothing, because nobody asked me. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in October. My parents had flown in from Houston. My mother had bought a new dress. My father had told the story of Daniel's restaurant to so many people that the mythology of the place had grown larger than the actual building. I drove up from Austin 2 days early to help with last-minute logistics, because that is what I do. I am the one who shows up with a labeled folder and a car charger and the correct address already in the navigation system. The night before the opening, Daniel and Trevor had a dinner meeting with their investors. My parents went to bed early. I stayed up in the Airbnb we had rented, reviewing a contract for a client back in Austin, my laptop open on the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the house. At 11:14, my phone buzzed with an alert from my credit monitoring app. I had set it up years ago at the suggestion of a colleague, and it had never once notified me of anything interesting. I assumed it was a routine inquiry from a credit card renewal. I almost swiped it away. The alert read, "New business credit line opened. Creditor, Lone Star Commercial Lending. Amount, $180,000. Inquiry origin, Texas." I sat completely still for 4 seconds. Then I opened the full report. The business name attached to the credit line was Harvest and Root LLC. The guarantor listed on the commercial loan was not Daniel. It was not Trevor. It was not my parents. It was me. My full legal name, my social security number, my home address in Austin, my Texas bar license number used as a professional credential to establish creditworthiness. I set my phone face down on the table. I picked it back up. I read it again. Then I opened my laptop and started working, not on my client's contract, but on finding out exactly how deep this went. By midnight, I had found 3 things. First, a certificate of formation for Harvest and Root LLC filed with the Texas Secretary of State 8 months ago, listing me as a co-managing member, a title I had never agreed to, never signed for, I never heard of. Second, a commercial lease for the East Austin location, signed in my name, with my forged signature at the bottom of 4 pages of binding terms. Third, a personal guarantee attached to the Lone Star loan that made me individually liable for $180,000 if the business defaulted. My handwriting, my information, My legal identity? Used without my knowledge to build someone else's dream on top of my financial life, like a foundation poured without telling the person whose land it was on. I knew the shape of what had happened. I had seen versions of it in fraud cases I had worked on. Someone needed a creditworthy name to secure financing. Daniel's credit was likely destroyed from his previous failures. Trevor was probably the same. My credit score was excellent. I had protected it with the same discipline I applied to everything, and my bar credentials added a layer of professional credibility that would have made lenders comfortable. They had not asked me because they knew the answer would have been no. I walked to the window and looked at the dark street outside. A car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across the yard. I thought about my mother's new dress hanging on the back of the bedroom door. I thought about my father's $40,000. I thought about all the people from the church who had been told the story. Then I went back to the table and made a list. The list had 4 items on it. I am a contracts attorney. When I am frightened, I make lists. I did not sleep. At 6:45 in the morning, I heard my mother moving in the kitchen. She was humming something. I think it was a hymn she used to sing when she did alterations, bent over the sewing machine in our childhood kitchen. The sound of it hit me somewhere behind my sternum and stayed there. I folded my laptop closed and walked into the kitchen. She was making rice the way she always did, measuring the water with her finger against the inside of the pot. She looked up when she heard me and smiled. She looked younger than she had in years. She was happy. "You're up early," she said. "Excited for today?" I said yes. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the counter and watched her cook, and I said nothing else, because I had decided that I was going to get the full picture before I did anything. I needed to talk to Daniel. I needed to hear whatever he was going to say. He came back to the Airbnb at 9:30, still buzzing from what was apparently a successful investor dinner, wearing a jacket I had never seen before that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He was on his phone when he walked in and held up one finger at me one moment and finished the call standing in the entryway. My father had come out of the bedroom by then. My mother had set the table. It looked like a family breakfast. It looked completely normal. "We need to talk," I said, when Daniel finally put the phone in his pocket. Outside. He read my face. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. More like the expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific delayed flight and has just seen it appear on the departures board. We stood on the back patio. The morning was warm. Somewhere nearby, someone was mowing a lawn. "The LLC," I said. He opened his mouth. "Don't," I said. "I pulled the filings last night. I have the certificate of formation. I have the lease. I have the Lone Star loan documents. I know my name is on all of it. I know my bar number is on the commercial guarantee. I need you to explain to me how that happened." He was quiet for a moment. Then he ran one hand through his hair and said, "It was temporary." "What was temporary?" "Having you listed. We needed the loan to close. Trevor's credit tanked after his divorce. Mine was," he paused. "Mine wasn't where it needed to be. We only needed your credentials to get the financing. Once the restaurant is profitable, we were going to refinance and remove your name. It would have been done in 18 months. You would never have had to deal with it. I am already dealing with it," I said. "My name is on a $180,000 commercial guarantee. If this restaurant fails, which, based on your track record, it is not going to fail. If it fails," I continued, "lenders come after me. Not you. Me. My savings. My home. My license." I paused. "My bar license, Daniel. You used my professional credentials to secure financing without my consent. That is not just fraud. That is specifically the kind of fraud that gets attorneys disbarred." He looked at the lawn next door. "We were going to tell you." "When?" "After the opening. When things were moving. When you could see it was real. You were going to tell me after I was already fully exposed." He turned back to me then, and his face did something I did not expect. It softened. Not into apology, into something older, something I recognized from childhood, the expression he used when he wanted our parents to side with him. "Claire," he said, using my name the way people use it when they want something, "this is the one. I know you don't believe me, but this is actually the one. The investors are serious. The chef is incredible. We have reservations booked through December. If you pull the plug on this right now, before it even opens, you're not just hurting me. You're taking $40,000 from Dad. You're taking this away from Mom. You know what this means to them." The guilt was immediate and physical, a tightening in my chest that I recognized from 30 years of being the responsible sibling, the careful one, the one who fixed things and asked for nothing. They had installed it in me so thoroughly I could feel it like a second skeleton. I looked at my brother and I understood, maybe for the first time with complete clarity, that he was not a reckless person who occasionally made bad choices. He was a person who had learned that his recklessness had a safety net, and that safety net had my name on it. "Go inside," I said. "Enjoy breakfast with Mom and Dad. I have some calls to make." He studied me. "What does that mean?" "It means go inside, Daniel." He went inside. I sat down in one of the plastic patio chairs and pulled out my phone. It was 10:15 in the morning. The grand opening was at 6 p.m. I had less than 8 hours, and I had a list. The first call was to the fraud division of Lone Star Commercial Lending. I identified myself as an attorney, which is a sentence that changes the temperature of most conversations. I explained that I had discovered an unauthorized use of my personal and professional information in connection with a commercial loan application. I told them I had not signed any guarantee documents. I told them I had documentary evidence of the forgery. The representative transferred me to their legal compliance team within 4 minutes. The second call was to the Texas Secretary of State's Business Division. I requested an expedited review of the Certificate of Formation for Harvest and Root LLC based on suspected fraudulent filing. I knew the process. I had helped clients navigate it before, always on the other side of the table. The third call was to my own attorney, a woman named Sandra, who handles civil litigation and who has been my personal counsel for 6 years. I gave her the summary. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Forward me everything. I'll start drafting the fraud complaint and the petition to dissolve the co-managing member designation. How quickly do you need this?" "Today," I said. "Then I need everything in my inbox in the next 20 minutes. The fourth call I did not make. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Then I put it back in my pocket, because I was not ready for that one yet. I sent Sandra everything I had. Then I sat outside for a while longer, listening to my family laugh through the kitchen window. My mother said something I couldn't hear, and my father laughed a real laugh, the kind he didn't do often. I sat with that sound, and I let it be what it was. Then I went inside. The opening was everything my parents had imagined. The restaurant was genuinely beautiful. The exposed brick walls, the warm lighting, the menu handwritten on a chalkboard. The chef sent out an amuse-bouche that made my mother press both hands to her cheeks. My father took photographs of everything. The bread, the candles, the sign above the door. Daniel moved through the room like he was born for it, shaking hands, laughing, charming every table. I watched all of it. I drank 1 glass of wine and smiled when people looked at me and said nothing. Daniel caught my eye twice across the room. The second time he held my gaze a beat too long, trying to read me, trying to calculate whether the morning conversation had been resolved in his favor. I gave him nothing. We drove back to the Airbnb in 2 separate cars. My parents went straight to bed, exhausted and glowing. I stayed up. At 11:47, Sandra sent me the completed fraud complaint and dissolution petition. At 12:10, I filed them both electronically. At 12:30, I wrote a message to my parents. Not a text. A real message. With paragraphs. The way I write when something matters. I explained what I had found. I explained what Daniel had done. I explained that I had filed the appropriate legal complaints and that the loan guarantee in my name was now formally disputed, which would trigger a review that would very likely halt operations until the ownership structure was clarified. I told them I loved them. I told them I was sorry about the $40,000. I told them I had not made this decision to hurt them, but that I could not allow my professional license and my financial future to be used as collateral for a venture I had never agreed to. I told them that Daniel's dream was not worth more than my life. Then I hit send, put my phone face down on the nightstand, and lay in the dark with my eyes open until I fell asleep somewhere around 2 in the morning. My mother called at 6:15 a.m. I let it ring. My father called at 6:22. I let that ring too. Then my mother called again, and on the 4th ring I picked up. She was not crying. She was very quiet, which was worse. "Did you really file it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Before you talked to us. I talked to Daniel. He told me it was temporary and that I would never have to deal with it. He made a mistake, she said. He should have asked you. He knows that. But Claire, if this review freezes the account the vendors are expecting payment, the staff has already been hired. Your father's... I know about Dad's money, Mom. Then how can you do this? It was not a question. It was the same sentence they had always used, dressed in different words. How can you be like this? How can you be so cold? Why can't you be more like your brother? Why is it always rules with you? Because my name is on the guarantee, I said quietly. Not Daniel's. Mine. If that restaurant fails tomorrow or in 18 months, the lenders come to me. They garnish my wages. They go after my home. They report it to the bar and I lose my license. Everything I have built for the last 12 years, Mom. Everything. And Daniel was going to tell me after the fact, once I was already fully exposed, because he knew I would say no. Silence on the line. He should have asked me, I said. If he had asked me, and presented the business plan, and shown me the financials, and made the case, maybe the answer would have been no, but at least it would have been my choice. He didn't ask because he didn't think my choice mattered. He thought the outcome he wanted was more important than my consent. And you calling me right now to talk me out of the complaint is telling me that you agree with him. My mother was quiet for a long time. That is not fair, she finally said. I know, I said. None of this is fair. I heard her breathing on the line. In the background, I could hear the coffee maker running, the familiar morning sounds of wherever she was. I had grown up with those sounds. They were the soundtrack of every Saturday morning, every holiday, every ordinary day of my childhood. I need you to understand that I am not doing this to punish him, I said. I am doing this to protect myself. I should not have to choose between protecting myself and being your daughter. I should never have been put in a position where those two things are in conflict. She didn't answer right away. The lawyer, she finally said. Is there any way to pause it? Just to talk? The filing is submitted. Sandra can advise us on next steps, but the process has started. I'm not going to withdraw it. Another silence. Okay, she said. It was a very small word. It didn't mean she agreed. It meant she had heard me, and that she was setting down the argument, at least for now. Okay, I said. We stayed on the line for a few more seconds without talking. Then my mother said she would call me later, and I said yes, and we hung up. The legal review of the Harvest and Root LLC filing took 11 days. During that time, the Lone Star loan was flagged as disputed, which froze the disbursement of a secondary draw Daniel had been counting on for operational costs in the first 60 days. Trevor dissolved his partnership with Daniel on day 6, citing the legal uncertainty, and took the head chef with him when he left. The chef's departure was the detail that hit the local food media and generated a brief flurry of coverage that my mother called me about in a tone I had not heard from her before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of exhausted grief. My name was officially removed from all filings on day 14, following Sandra's petition and my submission of a certified statement confirming I had never knowingly participated in the LLC formation or the loan application. The forged signatures were confirmed as forgeries by a document examiner. Daniel did not contest the removal. Lone Star Commercial Lending referred the matter to their internal fraud division. Whether they pursue criminal charges is a decision that belongs to them and to the prosecutors, not to me. Daniel called me on day 16. I did not pick up. He left a voicemail that was 3 minutes and 40 seconds long. I listened to it once. He said he was sorry. He said he had convinced himself it was not really fraud because he had always intended to tell me and always intended to repay me and had genuinely believed the restaurant would succeed. He said he knew that was not an excuse. He said he hoped someday I would understand that he had not meant to hurt me. I sat with the voicemail for 2 days. Then I called him back. It was not a warm conversation. It was not a resolution. It was 10 minutes of two people trying to figure out if there was enough left to build something on. I told him that intent does not change impact. He told me he understood that now. I told him I needed time. He said he would wait. I do not know what happens next with Daniel. I do not know if Harvest and Root survives in some restructured form or if it closes. I do not know if my parents will ever fully forgive me for the role I played in the outcome, even though I was the person whose identity was stolen. These things are still being sorted out somewhere in the complicated middle distance of family, and I have accepted that they may not be resolved cleanly. What I know is this: my bar license is intact. My credit is intact. My home is intact. My name is on nothing I did not choose. My father called me last Sunday. He did not mention the restaurant. He asked how work was going, and I told him. And he told me about a documentary he had watched about the national park system, and we talked for 22 minutes about entirely ordinary things. Before he hung up, he said, very quietly, that he was glad I had built the life I had built. I did not trust myself to say anything in response, so I just said, "Thanks, Dad." I meant it the way he meant it, in the careful language of people who love each other and do not always know how to say so. I went back to my desk and opened the contract I had been reviewing, and I read it very carefully from the beginning, the way I always do, checking every name, every clause, every signature line, making sure everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. There is a certain kind of betrayal that does not arrive with malice. It arrives wrapped in good intentions, in family loyalty, in the quiet assumption that you will understand once you see how well it all turned out. My brother did not forge my name because he hated me. He forged it because he had spent his entire life learning that the consequences of his choices were negotiable, and that I was one of the people who made them negotiable. That is the part that stayed with me long after the legal filings were submitted, and the loan was disputed, and my name was finally, officially, removed from everything it had never belonged on. It was not the act itself that revealed something new about my family. It was how unsurprised everyone was. My mother called to ask me to pause the complaint, not to tell me I had been wronged. My father said nothing at all for days. Daniel left a voicemail explaining his intentions, as though intentions were the currency that mattered. None of them said, "You should never have been put in this position," because on some level they had all accepted, long before that night, that my position was to absorb whatever spilled over. I think about the version of myself that might have paid it. The version that received the call, felt the familiar weight of guilt settle into her chest, and quietly opened the wire transfer screen to make it stop. That version existed. I had been her before, in smaller amounts, in quieter moments, every time I fixed something without being asked, and accepted the silence that followed as the only thanks I would receive. The difference between that version of me and the person who sat on a patio at 10 in the morning and made 4 phone calls is not courage exactly. It is clarity. At some point, the picture comes into focus, and you understand that absorbing damage on behalf of people who never asked permission to cause it is not generosity, it is a habit, and habits can be changed. What I have come to believe, after everything, is that the people who love us do not always know how to do it well. My parents are not cruel people. My brother is not a villain. They are people who built a set of assumptions about who I was and what I was for, and they never examined those assumptions because the assumptions kept working. The cost was mine to carry, and I carried it quietly, and so no one ever had to look at the weight. When you stop carrying it, they call it cold. They call it selfish. They call it a betrayal of the people who raised you. What they are actually experiencing is the first real consequence of something that should have had consequences much earlier. That discomfort belongs to them. It is not mine to absorb. I am a contracts attorney. I know the difference between an agreement and an assumption. What my family had built around me was never an agreement. I had never signed it. I had never been shown the terms. The document existed only because I had never looked for it, and the moment I did, I had every right to dispute it. My bar license is intact. My name is clean. My father called last Sunday and we talked for 22 minutes about national parks and ordinary things, and before he hung up, he said he was glad I had built the life I built. That is not resolution. That is a beginning. And for now, it is enough.